Hey guys, it's Jess from Misfortune Astrology. How's everybody doing? You guessed it, nap time, Mother's Day nap time. Happy Mother's Day to all of you who are celebrating today. Hope you get a chance to do a little bit of self-care and relaxation. This is a relentless job, it really is. So here today to talk to you guys because we have a big week coming up. We have 3 planets going retrograde this week and 2 other planets changing signs. So not your typical week. There's going to be a lot of kind of subtle shifts, but the overall kind of collective effect of them should be quite noticeable. And 2020, just generally speaking, is just a crazy year astrologically speaking, which is not hard to see, considering all the craziness that's going on around us in our day-to-day lives. But this week in particular marks quite a shift. It's not to say that by this time next week that everything in the world is going to be completely different. It certainly could play out that way. Things are quite volatile. However, as I said, these shifts are slightly subtle and may take a little while to ripple out, but should certainly be felt sooner rather than later. So I'm going to go through them quickly. I'm going to talk more about the retrogrades. The 2 planets that are switching signs are actually 2 of the personal planets. We have Mercury moving into Gemini Monday, tomorrow, May 11th. That's good. Mercury rules Gemini, so he will be very happy there in rulership, very strong. I'm sure you've noticed if you're on social media at all that everybody is quite fixed in their ideas right now. That is a direct result of Mercury having been through Taurus, one of the fixed signs. It does not surprise me to see people kind of digging in their heels and believing what they want to believe without any flexibility at this particular point in time. But that should lighten up once Mercury moves into Gemini. There will be a little bit less of a focus on what's provable right here and now, and a little bit more willingness to kind of think outside the box and consider sources that may be not as tried and true, but at the same time, do offer value. And then we have Mars, the other personal planet, moving into Pisces. That's happening on Wednesday, May 13th. And that, Mars is not terribly happy in Pisces. Mars is, he rules Aries and Scorpio, so it's not that he doesn't like water, but he, Pisces just super sensitive and emotional, and Mars just does not know what the fuck to do there. So, not the best placement for Mars overall. However, considering, as I mentioned, the volatility of the world and people right now, I think that Mars moving into Pisces might actually signal kind of a little bit of a good move overall. Should dampen some of the aggression again that's kind of coming out of the collective right now, or at least I'm hoping that that's the way it presents. So the combination of Mercury into Gemini, Mars into Pisces will hopefully kind of will help out. They will be kind of squaring each other for a little while, so we could see some tension in the beginning, but overall, as Mercury kind of moves past Mars, that tension should resolve, and hopefully things will get a little bit better on the personal front. But the focus of this video is actually going to be the 3 retrogrades that are starting this week. And that is Saturn. We have Saturn moving retrograde or spinning retrograde tomorrow, actually like right after midnight tonight here on the East Coast. May 11th is technically the date. Venus is spinning retrograde on Wednesday, May 13th, and Jupiter is spinning retrograde on Thursday, May 14th. So back to back to back, and sprinkled in with these 2 planetary moves of Mercury and Mars, there is a lot going on. So let's talk very briefly about what retrograde is. For those of you who are not familiar with what retrograde is, everybody kind of knows about Mercury. All the planets go retrograde at some point in the year, however, or some of them are on slightly longer cycles. Venus and Mars don't go quite as often as every year, but essentially what happens in every case is that there is a degree range, and a planet will appear from our vantage point on Earth. The planet will appear to cross that degree range moving forward, backward, and forward again, so 3 times. You know, this is just an optical illusion. It's not actually happening. Planets don't stop in reverse in the sky. They are all moving in one direction. However, we do move at different speeds and at different distances from the sun. And so from our vantage point here on Earth, it does sometimes appear that planets are moving in reverse and then kind of shifting back to forward again. Despite the fact that it is an optical illusion, there is a noticeable shift in the energies that are ultimately delivered by that planet. And so if you don't heed them and you try to continue with forward motion in that given area of energetic influence, you will be kind of thwarted and met with some serious resistance at the very least. And at most, you know, you'll have your forward progress completely undone by the universe. Saturn, like I said, he's first. He's going to spin retrograde late tonight. And when Saturn goes retrograde, karma it gets sorted out. So Saturn is the timekeeper. He is the planet of karma, right? So when he moves retrograde, karma is, you know, is kind of, like I said, is sorted out. Since he moved into his shadow, which happened in the first week of February, an issue has been introduced in your life, and this applies to the collective as well. And that issue has to do with your authority over something or your responsibility, something that you're supposed to be taking care of. And if you have been taking care of it to the best of your ability, then you have really nothing to fear from Saturn retrograde. And as a matter of fact, you know, you may be rewarded during Saturn retrograde or when he spins direct again. You know, the karma will kind of be sorted out and you'll be in line for one of Saturn's rewards, which are nice, right? We don't get them very often, but when we do get them, they tend to be very significant and very long lasting. However, if you're on the negative side of the equation and you have not been taking care of business in whatever area of life Saturn has been moving through for you since February, then you will be in line for some serious restriction and, you know, and a dose of fairly negative karma. So that is kind of, you know, what we're going to be looking to see as, you know, as he retrogrades. Now his retrograde, as I said, will start tomorrow. He retrogrades from April or May every year and through a good part of September. So we have months of this cycle, and you know it will be keenly felt by those people who have anything in the degree range, which is 25 degrees of Capricorn. Sound familiar? That's where Pluto is stationed right now. He's stationed retrograde about 2 weeks ago, at 25 degrees of Capricorn. So Saturn's on his way back to sow things up there. You know, Pluto's digging at that point, and Saturn's going to come back and fortify. That's going to happen. Let me just look here. So Saturn is going to come back and station to direct at 25 degrees Capricorn. He's going to reach that spot August 31st, and he's going to spin there to direct until October 27th. It's 2 months on that degree range. So that's going to be a very, very interesting time for the collective. I will dare to say that, you know, this second wave that everybody's talking about, if it were to materialize, my guess is it might start to materialize around then. That is just one way that this could possibly present. But there will certainly be something going on from late August through late October that will resonate very, very deeply for the collective. Pluto having churned up most of Capricorn by this time. Let's see here. So, and then I just thought it might be kind of interesting to talk very briefly too about what it means if you have Saturn retrograde in your natal chart. So most everybody, about 8% of the time, only 8% of the time is every planet moving direct. So that means that 92% of cases, people are born with at least one planet retrograde. The vast majority of people are born with an average of 2 to 3 planets retrograde in their natal chart, but it is actually more frequent to see somebody with 0 or 1 than it is to see somebody with like 5 or 6. 6 is like super rare. So 2 to 3 is kind of that sweet spot. And when you're born with a planet retrograde, it tends to indicate that that is an area of life where you screwed up in past incarnations, possibly over several of them, and that you chose to use this incarnation to right some of that karma. Now, whether you do it or not is completely up to you. People very largely forget their roadmap when they get here, and even if they are aware of what karmic lessons they chose to work through in this life, they do still have free will, so they can choose not to do them. And they'll just come back next time with even more planets retrograde. So, nothing is set in stone. However, it is nice to have an idea of your natal chart and kind of see what planets you have retrograde, because when they retrograde again in transit, like currently, you are more likely to receive lessons, during that time that will help you right the ship that you came here to right. So it's nice to kind of pay attention to the extent that you are being kind of handed an opportunity, to fix things from your karmic past. It's not to say that it will be easy. It's nice to kind of understand that you have that ability more so. So if you are born and if you're born with Saturn retrograde in your natal chart, which I was, it means that you shirked responsibility in past lives. You lack discipline, and you made others around you suffer for it, and others that you most likely had responsibility over. So possibly your children. You might have been a father who didn't provide for his kids. Saturn being father figure and, authority. That is kind of how you would expect it to show up in past life karma. So you're going to keep being presented in this lifetime with opportunities to right that karma. And those lessons will come during Saturn retrograde, which is upcoming, until you master them, or don't, and then you'll just come back and have to do it again, right? So over the course of the next few months, if you do have Saturn retrograde, it would pay to to look out for karmic lessons and see what you can do on that front. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, Venus. And I've already done a video on Venus retrograde, although I don't think I posted it here, but I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I can post the Venus retrograde video if people are interested, but she is going to retrograde. She starts her retrograde on Wednesday, May 13th. Now, she's been in shadow since April 9th. That's when I did the original video, I believe. She goes retrograde once every 18, 19 months, and she stays retrograde for approximately 7 weeks. So she's going to spin back to direct on June 25th, but she won't clear her shadow until, I believe it is July 29th. Maybe 27th. It's end of July. In any case, the degree range for her is she's in Gemini, and she will be backtracking from 21 degrees back down to 5 degrees of Gemini before she spins direct and moves over that degree range for the final time. So during Venus retrograde, love and money are flagged, right? These are areas of life where you do not want to be attempting to make any forward progress. The indication at this point is that you need to review or revisit some love or money issue that has been presented to you since she entered the shadow back on April 9th. So it's a good idea to kind of be aware of where in your life you should be looking for this. That would be indicated by the house that that Gemini sits in your individual natal chart. So general rules of thumb when Venus is retrograde: no beauty treatments. I know that one's a bitch because we're all in quarantine, pulling gray hairs left and right, needing all kinds of self-care along beauty lines, but not indicated while Venus is retrograde. So even assuming for the sake of arguments that salons and stuff are allowed to open, COVID notwithstanding, not terribly smart to be doing anything too drastic. Certainly not trying out any new stylists, because the indication is just that it will not work out. And it sounds shallow, but you don't want to be on the receiving end of this. And I can't tell you how many people since Venus went retrograde, it's all over my social media, like, I think I'm going to cut bangs. Like, all right, go ahead. I dare you. Honestly, it never ceases to amaze me how when a planet is about to retrograde, the one thing the two things that you're not supposed to do, everybody's energized to do it all of a sudden. It's love and it's money. So, business ventures, not necessarily the smartest thing to be entering new business ventures right now. You can find value in things that are old, antique, right? There's definitely ways to use this energy to your advantage, but you don't want to be buying any big ticket items. Definitely not the time to be house hunting if you can avoid it. There's just, that house is going to turn out to be a money pit. There's just going to be something wrong with it, right? Same idea with love. New relationships are not favored right now. However, if you do have an ex come into the picture now, it may be karmically the right time for a revisit of that, assuming for the sake of argument that the relationship was not toxic, right? If it was abusive or toxic in any way, you should run from it the same way that you probably ran from it when Venus was not retrograde. But Venus retrograde is notorious for bringing exes back into the picture, so just be cautious of that, be aware of that. And Venus retrograde in the natal chart is also an interesting one. If you have Venus retrograde in your natal chart, it tends to indicate that in past lives and incarnations, you were a bit of a cad, right? You did not do right by lovers in your past lives. Maybe you cheated on them. Maybe you walked out on them during times where they were, deeply in need. You might have been physically abusive to them. There's lots of ways, obviously, that this could show up. But the idea being that in this lifetime, you are being called upon to right that karmic ship. Now, Venus retrograde in the natal chart usually indicates a person that has a tough time expressing love outwardly. And so those people go through life kind of having, this tends to manifest for them in their love relationships. They have a tough time kind of figuring it out for themselves. And the key really is, with Venus retrograde, is that you have to master the art of self-love first. And Venus retrograde in transit, like she will be starting on Wednesday and going through mid-June, should present you with opportunities to do that. Now, they're not always going to be overt opportunities, right? The idea being that with Venus retrograde, you should not be forward-moving, outwardly forward-moving with any type of love relationship. But so, that being the case, it's prime time to be able to kind of reflect and go inward and to practice self-care and to practice self-love, because when you do come out the other side of that, you should find that you have an easier time loving others, because really the way that you love others is just a reflection of how you feel about yourself. And Venus retrograde people tend to have a tough time with that. And last but not least, we have Jupiter going retrograde. He spins retrograde on Thursday, May 14th. So he is another one who goes about once a year. His retrogrades last about 4 months, and he covers 10 degrees of the zodiac each time. So the degree range for this bad boy will be, he's at 27 degrees of Capricorn right now. He's going to retrograde back to 17 degrees of Capricorn. Now, 27 degrees of Capricorn, if you've been following along with my videos, should sound relatively familiar as well, because that is where Pluto will ultimately return to for the United States Pluto return in a couple of years. So Jupiter is on that spot right now. He's been on it for a little while. He's going to stay on it for a little while before he actually starts to backtrack, but he stations and retrogrades on Thursday. So, whatever Jupiter is stirring up right now is really a precursor and a preview to what we are likely to see in a couple years' time when Pluto gets to that spot and moves back and forth over it. So very interesting to see what themes present now that will be, that will definitely be revisited when Pluto comes through and knocks it all down in a couple of years. But Jupiter retrograde is a time for reflection on spiritual and philosophical beliefs, right? So he going retrograde is an indication that you have experienced a period of growth and expansion, right? That's what Pluto does for everybody. But you've kind of hit a wall with it. And, a period of reflection and consolidation is kind of needed. So again, like all retrogrades, it is a good time to kind of be going inward. With Jupiter, specifically, it is about going inward spiritually. He is, I said, 27 to 17 degree range. Yes. Okay, and in the natal chart, Jupiter retrograde indicates that you had trouble purifying your soul in a past life. Now, this does not mean that you are a bad person, okay? That's kind of this common misconception that if you're born with Jupiter retrograde that you sucked at life. No, not necessarily. I mean, it's entirely possible that you did, and just no judgment. I also have Jupiter retrograde in my natal chart. So the indication actually is, so if you're familiar with evolutionary astrology and the ideas that kind of surround it, we choose to come in and we choose to work on specific issues of karma from past lives when we incarnate every time. But we get here and we are immediately gifted with amnesia, right? So a lot of us kind of go through a big chunk of our lives. Some of us go through our entire lives, never remembering what karmic lessons we actually sought to right in this lifetime. And so, on top of that, add to that problem that we also have free will, right? And so even if we do remember or are reminded of what karmically we are meant to be doing here, we can choose not to do it. And so having Jupiter retrograde indicates that you, for whatever reason, you gave yourself karmic jobs and goals in a prior lifetime and you failed to meet them. Now, that might be because you chose not to meet them. It might be because, things just went off the rails in other ways that, weren't foreseeable to your soul prior to incarnating in those particular instances. Nothing's set in stone. Everybody has free will and we all kind of converge upon each other. And so, it's not really about right or wrong. It's just that in this incarnation, you're being called to understand that you have failed some karmic missions in the past. And, not to dwell on that fact, but just to understand that that is the case. And so in this incarnation, you really should do everything you can to become aware of what your karmic path looks like, to try to figure out what karmic lessons you are meant to be learning in this lifetime, and to work on them, to make the conscious choice every day to try to work on those issues as best as you can. So I think I hear my daughter yelling for me, which means nap time is officially over and my Mother's Day relaxation is now complete. So hopefully this was helpful. I am always here for questions and stuff, guys. I've been getting a lot of positive feedback on these videos and I'm really happy about that. So retrograde planets are absolutely fascinating. If you have some in the natal chart and you want to understand them, I do charts for them. Whatever your ascendant is, the planet that rules that ascendant, certainly retrogrades, unless it's the sun and the moon. That's the Cancer rising and Leo rising people. You guys have it lucky a little bit, right? Everybody else. Our ruling planets go retrograde, and it's always a good time to, it's a good thing to know, when that's happening, why that's happening, where that's happening, right? So definitely reach out if I can be of service to you in that way, and I will see you guys soon. Happy Mother's Day, and namaste.